Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Today's session is from Tiffany Lester. Welcome to our Sitecore User Group Columbus. This is a session from Tiffany on jumpstarting your optimization program with A/B testing. It will be related to XM Cloud, Sitecore XM Cloud, the coolest feature, coolest product I have worked on. Tiffany is two-time Sitecore MVP, and she is working for Perficient, and she will be going on with the session. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. So today we are going to be talking about how to jumpstart your optimization program with A/B testing and how to leverage XM Cloud to do that. Just a little bit about me, building on. I'm a lead digital strategist at Perficient. I like to consider myself a master chef of digital strategy and just a super curious person who's looking to innovate for national and global companies. I'm a two-time strategy MVP. I'm Content Hub and Personalized certified. And just a little bit about me outside of work is I love the outdoors. I I wakeboard and garden and cook, and I just love traveling whenever I get a chance. And if you're interested, connect with me on LinkedIn. That QR code is at the bottom. So our agenda today is going to be talking about your optimization program, the key components of that. Then we'll discuss some different experimentation types, how to brainstorm use cases, creating a prioritized backlog with those use cases, implementation and execution on XM Cloud, and then how to do an experimentation analysis. And we'll also touch on how to grow your optimization program overall and start scaling personalized experiences across the board. So to kick us off, there's really two key components of your optimization program. You have your experimentation and your personalization. And experimentation is really all about finding that best average experience across a broad audience or segment. And personalization is really delivering that best individualized experience to one-on-one users. The really key component here is starting your optimization program with experimentation first. This really provides the data that you need to continue to scale your personalization efforts and back your hypotheses with data that proves that changing a particular button or CTA or changing how a user gets to the end of your funnel is really going to be the best personalized experience for those users. So using experimentation to prove those concepts out first is really going to help you reduce overall risks when you are implementing personalization and improving like key metrics for your users and just validating those assumptions that you have with that real data before you continue to scale. So I always recommend when you are starting off your optimization program that you start with experimentation first. That way you can, again, reduce any risks and positively impact your key metrics all at the same time. With that, there's a couple different experimentation types that you can implement within your optimization program. Today, we're really going to be focusing about that A/B testing, which is really just comparing two different versions of a single variable on a particular page. This could also mean that you're removing that variable too. Maybe there's a particular piece of content that isn't getting the conversion and taking away from other conversions that might be on the page. So you might just want to change or remove that variable as well. Then you have your multivariate testing, which is actually testing multiple different variables simultaneously to see if there's a better combination of maybe different components or different CTAs on a page. So it's kind of that next level above A/B testing. And then you have your multi-arm bandit, which is a little bit more advanced than multivariate, and it's actually leveraging machine learning to dynamically allocate traffic to the best performing variation as the test continues to be executed. This really helps maximize your return on investment while that experimentation is taking place, and just making sure that there's not going to be a lot of traffic allocated to maybe like a losing variant. And then you have your funnel testing, and this is really just focusing on optimizing the multiple steps in your user journey that you've mapped out. So maybe you're changing different key touch points as a part of your user journey, and it's just leveraging more AI and machine learning to optimize your overall user journey and not just a single variable. So we have a couple different types of experimentation that we can implement. Kind of like I mentioned today, I really recommend starting with A/B testing when you're kicking off an optimization program. That way you can really adopt the correct strategy, the correct culture, and set up your data to be successful as you continue to grow this program. So let's talk about how to brainstorm use cases. When you're first kicking off, it might be a little bit overwhelming looking at your data and analytics and really determining where do I even begin when it comes to A/B testing? So I use 3 different types of analysis when I'm starting to build my first backlog. And it's heuristic analysis, quantitative analysis, and qualitative analysis. This really gives you the full spectrum of utilizing your experts in UX and design, to using data-driven metrics, to also getting insights on behavior and motivations to develop hypotheses and use cases that you want to test and improve on. So for your heuristic analysis, this is really just where you're taking those expertise in different areas. So maybe it's your UX designers or your marketers or your strategists or even your content creators or business stakeholders, and kind of evaluating how does the site actually perform for our overall goals? Is it clear what action we want the user to take? Does it meet the accessibility guidelines that we need to achieve? Can the user navigate to our content easily? And you're really using your site as the evaluation point here, and just using your expertise within your platform. So I always like to do a brainstorming session or a whiteboarding session where people are adding sticky notes about what they think of your overall site design without using data or user insights quite yet. Then we have your quantitative analysis. So this is really where you're kind of going into your Google Analytics, your XM Cloud Analytics, or maybe you're using something like Piwik or Hotjar to track a couple of different other areas, and measuring your KPIs and metrics like your page views, your user acquisition, your page load times, to identify areas of opportunity that maybe you might see that is not performing the way you think you should. So are users viewing to actually scroll the content that we have at the bottom of the page? How many page views did we get over month to month? Are we seeing any trends with our bounce rate on particularly high value pages? And kind of taking those insights from those data driven and seeing where those areas of opportunity lie with our measurement performance. And then we have our qualitative analysis, and this is really reaching out to users and getting insights on their behaviors, their motivations, or their friction points within your site, and really brainstorming about how you can improve based on their feedback that they're gonna provide. So I always ask the questions like, what are their main pain points that they're trying to solve with our content or with our services and products? How do they perceive our brand? Are we a trustworthy, credible brand? And if not, how can we improve that? What is their overall experience with our brand on a digital basis? And a couple platforms that you can utilize to measure this is not only your XM Cloud, but also things like Hotjar or Qualtrics. So you can watch like user recordings, you can deliver surveys, and that'll kind of give you that qualitative analysis that you need. And so I take all of these insights and feedback and data points from each of these 3 sections, and I build out a optimization backlog. So this is where I take all of those insights and really start ideating use cases and hypotheses. And there's just a couple of knowledges and best practices here when you're starting to build out this optimization backlog. One is define clear objectives for each use case. Is it trying to improve a particular metric? Are we trying to remove a friction point that we're seeing and developing a hypothesis that for that particular use case? And then setting a criteria for prioritization. You're going to have multiple ideas coming out of those 3 different analysis and audits that you're going to do for your site. Making sure that you understand how you're going to prioritize is going to be super important to executing that strategy correctly. Collaboration is another part that I really like to emphasize. You're going to have multiple teams working on this, whether it be your marketers, your designers that are going to be building new components for you that you want to test, your business stakeholders that might be the experts in that part of your service or your products that you're working on to optimize, and even your developers. They are really great partners in the experimentation and optimization, and they might have really great ideas to also improve maybe like page load performance or interaction. So I really pitch collaboration across cross-functional teams and starting to adopt the optimization culture across those teams. So when you continue to scale, you don't hit any obstacles. I also like to say balance short-term wins with long-term goals. There might be something that you want to experiment, such as like funnel testing, that just might take a little bit longer to develop or to gather data on, that you might not be able to test initially. So make sure that you're just evaluating what's the potential to the business, the impact, what's the level of effort for us to implement this particular test, and those things will help you decide what test should come first, and then what can kind of be a part of your backlog to be executed later on, which we'll talk about how to prioritize and some questions that you might want to ask yourself when you're evaluating what use case should come first. Iterate and adapt. We live and should live in a build, measure, learn methodology, which we'll touch on a little bit later on after you analyze your experiments. But being able to be flexible and adapt to the data that you're seeing a part of experiments is really what this optimization culture is all about. So just having that flexibility and that adaptable mindset is going to make this more successful. And then, of course, measure and report progress is super important for this type of program as well. You will be investing time, energy, resources, as well as investing in new products along the way. So just making sure that you're measuring and reporting across not only within your team, but across business stakeholders is really going to help you maximize that return on investment and get buy-in from that executive level to continue to grow the program. So just make sure that you are keeping track of the important metrics and having a set report that you can send out for people to easily digest, which I do have a sample report that you can utilize as well later on. So taking this and actually creating use cases individually, I really wanted to provide a sample of what does an experimentation use case look like. This might seem a little bit intimidating to set all these different parameters. At first, it might be a little bit of a lengthy process, but doing this from the get-go is going to help you, again, iterate and become more and more efficient over time, as well as have all the data points that you need to prove the return on investment for experimentation. So this is what a sample experimentation card can look like. We have our problem statement, so our opportunities to improve hero engagement. Maybe we're not seeing the interactions we want to see from our users when they first land on our homepage. We provide a hypothesis, so you really want to show that you have the right ideas about how to improve your design, and you're proving that through the experimentation. So coming up with a hypothesis statement is going to be a part of your hypothesis or your experimentation card. So I said by updating the call to action headline, we will be able to improve engagement by 10%. So I'm making it very clear that I just don't think our call to action headline is as engaging as we would like, and that is going to be the variable that needs to be updated to improve that engagement by a particular percentage. I also like to set test decisions, and this really sets the expectation of what your team and other stakeholders should expect if this experiment is successful, inconclusive, or even sees a negative impact. And just setting that expectation of what are the next steps if we do see success or failure. So that could look like if the new invariant does improve conversions by 10%, we will keep that updated CTA button text for all audiences because we found that that is the best average experience for our general population. If variant sees a negative impact, maybe we have a different experiment that we want to move forward. Maybe it's not just the headline, but it's the piece of content. And we actually have something else in our backlog that we're ready to queue up in the homepage area if we see a negative impact with this change. And then if we do see that a test is inconclusive, maybe we just need to do some more research. We've figured out that we're not really sure how to improve engagement with this particular hero. So let's go back to our qualitative analysis and redo the survey research that we initially did, maybe expanding our audience or sample size. Then we also want to lay out other test parameters that are going to be considered in our test setup. So that could be our desired goal that we're going to be tracking, our location or impacted URLs. There might be a test that goes across your site. So we just want to make sure where exactly we're testing and making sure that we don't have overlapping personalization or other experiments in flight. What devices we want to test on. Maybe there's a particular contextual consideration that we need to have, whether it's just desktop or mobile users. I also like to set a minimum and maximum duration. XM Clouds and potentially other Sitecore products that you're using, like Personalize, may give you the recommended duration test just based on your confidence level and your sample size that it's needed to reach. However, also having these test constraints and making sure that an experiment isn't going to go on too long, I recommend from an optimization standpoint. And you also might have other campaigns coming up. So maybe during the homepage, next month, you have a campaign that the content has to change. And so we just need to be able to run this test for 30 days. So setting those test parameters are also going to be super important, and setting those expectations across the business. What's our primary metric? Obviously, we need to be able to track our performance. So setting the goal expectations and configuring that is going to be crucial to the success of this. So obviously, we're not just looking for scroll depth on the page. We really want people to see and click through the hero. So I chose the hero click through, or click to action call to action click, and then the confidence level. So 95% confidence level. And this is really where it determines sample size. How confident do we want to be that these test results were accurate across our general audience? 95% is a really great benchmark. It is the standard across most experiments. So you don't really have to change to like 99% or 90. That'll just change your sample size. I do recommend sticking with the 95%. Couple other tips and tricks when you're setting up A/B tests is really when you're just getting started with experimentation, just make sure that you're doing one variable within the A/B test. If you're changing too much within one particular component, it's going to be really hard to determine that variable was actually the reason that you saw the improvement engagement. So just changing the headline, just changing the call to action, or changing the color imagery, we just want one of those variables to be tested when we're first kicking this off. Defining the test setup prior to implementation, who's going to be responsible, is there any development that needs to be happening? Having those conversations prior and a plan is going to make this improve that time to market for your experimentation, and making sure that we're meeting our launch date. Defining our benchmarks to determine next steps. I kind of touched on that. We want to make sure that the business and anybody involved in the experimentation is going to have buy-in based on what we're learning from this test. What are our next steps in implementation? So setting those expectations up front is something that I've seen success in when we're first adopting the optimization. And I also like to create a sample report to ensure everyone is aligned with what we anticipate measuring and reviewing at the end of a particular experimentation. That way, when we do see a successful variant, or we're ready to take those next steps in terms of those test decisions, there's no surprises across the stakeholders, and they understand how to read and analyze the report that you guys are going to be providing them to show that return on investment for a particular experiment. Once we've created all of those use cases and we've defined our hypothesis, the metrics, this is really where we can start prioritizing our use cases. So when you are first building that backlog, we just really want to make sure that we're not overloading our teams to launching experiences. We're not overlapping tests on particular pages. And maybe there's particular tests that might have conflicting audiences, and we just want them to be a part of one test. So there's a few questions and factors that I really like to pose when we are prioritizing particular use cases. Our very first one is potential impact to business. Does this drive revenue? Is it the most impactful conversions that we have, or is it just something like content consumption? How are these KPIs currently performing? What do we think that how much do we think we can move the needle for this particular business objective? If we don't think it'll move the needle a lot and it's already performing well, maybe that's not really the test that we move forward with. So that's just some consideration to have from a business aspect, how to prioritize. And then, of course, there might be something that isn't necessarily driving high value conversions a part of a business, but we do know that it's very impactful for our users. So is this removing any friction for the visitor? Are we seeing rage clicks within Hotjar? Does it help save them time, even though it's really not like a bottom of the funnel action that we're trying to improve? This is still really high value engagement with experimentation and even personalization. So having those questions from a user perspective will help you evaluate where does this fall in terms of prioritization. I always like to also evaluate level of effort to implement. If we are testing maybe a brand new component or design and we're dependent on developers or a UX designer to spin up some mock-ups, maybe that's not the first test that we go with, even though it might be high value. Maybe we start with a test that we already have a component for and we already have the images sourced, or it's just a simple content change. Those are some of the questions that I also ask from a level of effort to implement, and how quick can we get a quick win with our experimentation. Testing tracks is another one. So this is what area of the site are we testing on? How many tests do we currently have running on a particular test track or site area? Do we already have like 6 experiments running on a particular page? If so, maybe that needs to be moved into a later timestamp when we don't have 6 experiences or we don't have other personalization rules running for a particular campaign. So evaluating how much you're testing on a particular page, again, it kind of goes back to making sure we're starting with A/B tests, is going to be one of the ways that we prioritize our use cases and our backlog. Once we have prioritized our use cases, we've built our hypotheses card, and we're ready to move forward with our very first step. The really great news is it's a super simple setup in XM Cloud. They've made it super easy for marketers to go ahead and configure these A/B tests within the platform itself. So all you have to do is select the component you would like to test, and you're going to collect a little beaker icon that's on the component once you have it set up. And then it's going to just ask you your experiment name. So when you are creating a backlog, I do have rules of naming conventions for experiments. They all have their own individual IDs. So when we're tracking that backlog, we can understand what's live today, what's still running, and what needs to be concluded. So that would be the experiment name that we put in. And then you're going to determine what you do with the variant within XM Cloud. So you have 3 different options. You can create a whole new variant with a new component design. You can just swap out the content on that particular component, or you can even hide that component. So XM Cloud gives you those 3 options in terms of A/B test options. Then you're going to configure your goal. So this is going to be our primary metric that's going to drive who is going to be the winning variant. So whether that's the call to action or a page view that we have, we're able to set our primary metric up within the A/B test. And then you're going to assign traffic to variants. When you're first starting out of an A/B test, I always recommend doing 100% of the allocation and splitting your audiences evenly and randomly. At this point, we are just starting with A/B tests. So that's just, again, 50-50 is what you want for your A/B, and you want 100% of allocation. That's going to get you to also a winning variant quicker, just depending on a couple other test parameters. So that actually goes into my next comment, is you do have access for advanced settings for traffic allocation. So you can set the base rate, the minimal detectable difference, and your confidence level if you desire to do this. This gets a little bit more advanced into experimentation test parameters. Your base rate is what you're seeing already for a conversion. So how many people are hitting the page and actually converting on that call to action that you have as a button, that's going to be your base rate. Your minimal detectable difference is the lift that you want to see. So maybe by changing our call to action headline that I put in our hypothesis card, I said that we'd have a 10%. So that's going to be that minimal detectable difference that we want to see. And your confidence level is going to decide from a statistical significance, how accurate are these results? So is it 99, 95, 90%? You're able to change that. And that's ultimately going to change your sample size per variance that needs to reach that statistical significance. That's always a tongue twister for me. But again, like I said, when you're first starting out A/B test, I typically always like for our users just to leave these at the default. It'll calculate that sample size. 95% is an acceptable confidence level to be at. And then that way, as you guys are moving forward, you know what winning variant was accurate. And then you can determine automated actions if you desire to. So that's upon test conclusion. If you want it to automatically have the winning variant be the permanent experience, or if the test is inconclusive, you just want to go back to the control variant, you're able to determine how that automated action is executed on for test. When I'm first starting out, because I like to really run retros, which we'll talk about in a little bit, I typically don't do any automated actions and just make sure that we go back and we are evaluating how did we perform, are we seeing any observations, and what are our next steps. But you do have this tool that if you are kind of small on resources, or you don't have the time allocated to go back and evaluate the test immediately, you're able to set up these automated actions for XM Cloud to designate the appropriate variant based on certain conditions. With that, you do have the chance and opportunity to measure results with an XM Cloud too. It gives you a pretty comprehensive view about how your experiences are going to be performing. So you have how many days the test has been running, how many total unique visits you have, goals per visit, the status of the test, so whether or not it's complete, it's still pending, it's live, it's draft, and then you also have a margin error per goal. So with tests, you always have, even though you allocate 100% of your traffic, there's technically always a holdback with experiments and personalization. That 5% of your audiences is always going to be held back, and it kind of gives you an idea about how much error is happening within that particular experiment, or, is the winning variant really not going to work for like 2.8% of the people based on this margin of error. So it's just another way for your marketers or even your data analysts to determine how successful was this experiment and is the data accurate or not. Based on all of those parameters above, you're going to be able to filter by time span. So maybe you want to just see how the test performed within a week of a 2-week period. You're going to be able to do that. Also, you're going to be able to view this by device. So were they on mobile or were they on desktop, and see how the experiment performed across different devices as well. So this is what comes out of the box with XM Cloud. I have worked with clients and companies before that we do not just leverage XM Cloud to measure the success of our experiment, but we also measure through Hotjar or even Google Analytics. So if you need some more robust data, or you're looking for something specific that XM Cloud isn't providing you in those dashboards, you do have that opportunity to lean on and also just double check data points within different platforms. But that is just a conversation to have as you're setting up optimization, and if that's really necessary, because as I kind of mentioned, XM Cloud will give you all of the data points that are super crucial into evaluating whether an experiment was successful or a failure. So with those results, again, I always like to do a retrospective to gain deeper insights from all the past experiments. And this is really starting to build upon that build, measure, learn methodology and becoming more data-driven organization when you're talking about starting up an optimization program. So this is just a sample card that you can utilize. Again, we show how many total impressions per variant, the conversion rate per variant, and then we compare those two variants together. But I like to also tell them, what confidence level did we actually reach? What was the time period that the test had to actually run? What were the total impressions overall from our experiment? But then I also have these two cards at the bottom, and there's these observations. So was the hypothesis correct? Did we learn anything new about our user behaviors based on the experiment? And did we have any learnings from side? Did we need additional support? Were our goals not tracking correctly at first? And what can we improve on from an operational standpoint to continue to scale our efforts and become more and more efficient with growing our optimization program? So I do like to look at it from a performance standpoint as well as an operational standpoint. And then we can come up with recommendations, ideas. So based on our observations, we should start brainstorming our next experiment or personalization. So were there certain audience segments, or did we see a dip on a certain variant, and maybe we think a certain segment will do better for variant B or C, and we can start really expanding those experimentation ideas and becoming more data-driven in our overall backlog. Do we want to expand this to the additional areas of the site? Maybe there's a different site that we have the same content or similar content that isn't getting the same level of performance. So maybe we need to test that area as well. And how do we become more efficient for the next experiment? Maybe it's not depending on a new design or a new component and just sourcing content. And also, maybe there's something from a broader perspective that we need to update based on our experiment. Do we need to update our brand standards? Is there new designs that need to be built out based on what we learned? So these experiments in personalization isn't just about improving that particular conversion rate, but also how do we become data driven across our digital marketing and digital strategy. And with that, I always like to remind clients and customers and organizations I work with, the experiments, whether or not it's going to be successful or failure, it's always going to provide us useful information that can benefit the next experiment. I really love this quote from one of my favorite books by Rick Rubin. All art is a work in process. It's helpful to see the piece that we're working on as an experiment. Whatever the results, we will receive useful information that will benefit that next experiment. And it really, really supports this ideology and methodology of we're really supposed to be building, measure, and learning. And it's just going to be a continuous cycle of launching experiences and experiments across the board. So if you're able to adopt that iterative mindset, you're going to be way, way more successful with this optimization program in the long term, especially when you're talking about advanced personalization models or advanced segmentation. You're going to have all of the data to kind of take the guesswork out of scaling that program and have the data that you need to deliver those one-on-one individualized experiences. And with that, I just also like to close out on a note of what this actually looks like, starting with A/B testing in XM Cloud and growing into products like CDP and Personalize and scaling this program to really be an omni-channel optimization program. So for the crawl, we definitely just want to establish the basic tracking on our primary site and maybe potentially mobile app for tracking events, defining that initial optimization, ideation, and backlog, and only focusing on 1 to 2 simple web experiments with high business impact at first. We're going to start to see as we go into the walk, we're going to build upon that backlog based on those learning, adopting that build, measure, learn methodology from an optimization program standpoint. Maybe we start launching personalized experiences based on those experiments that we ran part of our crawl stage. We can start implementing more advanced experiments as well. So maybe including next best action, maybe doing multivariate testing, or even that multi-arm bandit and leaning into the machine learning section of this optimization. And then establishing an optimization team to maintain experiences and experiments is something that I recommend during the walk. Your marketers and your strategists have a lot on their plate, from creating new content, just standard content, to starting to manage different variants, to also considering SEO, to also considering the campaigns that they have to run during special time periods throughout your business year. So just making sure that you maybe have an established optimization team to support all of that content that you're initially creating will continue to help you scale as well. For the run, as you scale, you're going to start to need more and more data, especially when we're talking about advanced segmentation. So this is where we might want to start tracking across adjacent channels. Maybe it's a marketplace, maybe it's a social media, maybe we have a CRM that we want to connect a CDP to. So we're starting to really invest in additional products to develop more impactful experiences and experiments, and then leveraging those additional systems for advanced targeting as well. For our fly, this is where we can start leaning into machine learning algorithms, so that multi-arm bandit, as well as AI. Maybe that's creating new content based on segmentation, but you should start being able to scale this and leverage different products to be able to support this, which we all, if you aren't aware, Sitecore has made the investment with Sitecore Stream to not only be able to do AI image and text generation, but you also kind of have a digital marketing assistant that's going to be able to look into your CDP and help you ideate and evaluate maybe how certain audience segments are performing on your site. So there are ways that you can expedite and improve your time to market leveraging AI systems as well. At this point, I also like to say that we should have a data-driven optimization backlog at this point. So instead of being really a guessing game and just kind of doing those initial analysis, we're in that build, measure, learn cycle. So every single experiment, every single personalize is helping us ideate the next experience that we want to launch. And then I also like to open it up. More departments should be onboarded, whether that be your social media team or your email team, and leveraging the omni-channel optimization that we're trying to achieve. We need to start bringing in those business stakeholders and having them ideate, having their expertise on where they're losing a conversion, and that will help you not only have a really great digital experience on your site, but your adjacent channels as well. And then for the nurture, this is kind of like the gold standard. This is where we're in our flow. We have a dedicated optimization program team that can support all your departments and requests for optimization. We have a standard reporting. We have one-on-one tailored experiences across all the customer channels. And then we also have stakeholder and executive buy-in for the optimization program. So your C-suite is seeing that return on investment from a product and operational standpoint as well. And then just continuing to leverage those AI insights. Obviously, we're starting that in the fly, but as you start to be able to feed your AI models and those insights and those grow, that's going to be more and more in tune with your particular business and your segments, and how to continue to grow that optimization program. And at this point, you're going to be in a really great cycle of build, measure, learn, and having one of the best customer experiences that you can have on the digital space. But this is going to be the idea of what your optimization program should be about. And with that, that is all I had for today about how to grow your optimization program. Just starting with A/B testing. Again, XM Cloud is a really great starting point. It's easy to use for marketers. It has all the right data points, and it's a super exciting time for marketers and digital strategists. Do we have any questions?
Great presentation, Tiffany. So much information. I think we'll open it for the audience for question. I have one. I can ask that later if anyone has questions. Maybe I should start with ask, since it is XM Cloud and I am a developer, so I understand that XM Cloud has limitations, right? One of them is it can only hold like a 30 days data. That's what I heard. So like, what we can do in XM Cloud, why we should go with personalize, what benefit are we going to get to include personalize in the solution?
Yeah, personalize has a lot more options in terms of complexity. I would say that's the one that you want to use for multivariance and advanced segmentation. They have what's referred to as decision models. So based on certain actions, that you can really do that next best action experimentation. In terms of data that you can view, yeah, it also has a little bit more extensive collection. It's leveraging the CDP stream API.
Mm-hmm.
So you have about 6 months of data at that point, and storing and collecting a certain amount of data. With CDP, once you layer that on, you get a lot more robust, and you can start pulling from different sources. So if you have a CRM and a data warehouse, that becomes a really great data orchestration tool, a part of your segmentation. So I would say the XM Cloud, again, is just a really great starting point. As you start getting more advanced into your use cases, like if you're trying to do an experiment with multiple different audience segments, or you want to lean into like that multi-arm bandit, that is where you're going to want to layer on items like personalize and CDP.
Okay, also, like, I guess from reporting perspective, what XM Cloud provides is not like, when you go to the personalize, you see a lot more in terms of reporting, right? So
yeah, it's kind of. So it's very similar to what you're seeing in XM Cloud today. It breaks down by goal visits. It gives you the margin of error, page total unique sessions, total unique visits. It really just depends on the data point that you're looking for, whether or not personalize or XM Cloud is going to meet that standard, or if we're going to have to lean on additional analytics. But personalize and XM Cloud, I would say, is very similar in terms of experience analytics that you're going to get.
Okay.
I think you get really more of like, you get more in depth operational analytics within personalize is really where it starts to separate that out, and evaluating like successful executions, or, you know, how many times did this execute within a certain time period. You can get more detailed in that.
Claire, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tiffany, for joining and sharing this today. This was a really awesome presentation and super timely for our team. So we're really lucky to have a fairly sizable team of content editors that work on the website. One thing that as we start to dip our toes into optimization, just one little hang up that makes me nervous is with a decentralized kind of content management group, how do you make sure that there's not interference with your tests? I think I remember that Sitecore gives a warning to somebody if they're trying to edit a page that has a test active on it. But is there like a way that you keep everybody in the loop on what's being tested? Or
Yeah, absolutely. So we've managed this a couple different ways. So yes, Sitecore, especially XM Cloud, gives you the dashboard of what tests are live, pending, and draft, so you can kind of see, you know, based on the location, if there's overlapping tests. When you're first starting out, especially from a decentralized, I also recommend doing this a little bit more manual too within an Excel spreadsheet. And what we do is we create test tracks. So your homepage might be a test track, a certain section of your other site might be a test track. And then you put those use cases under each of those test tracks and then prioritize within that test track as well. So we've leaned on XM Cloud, but we've also leaned on something like an Excel sheet to manage your use cases and making sure, okay, we have this test case live within this test track. We really shouldn't go live for this next use case until we've closed out the experiment, especially if you're talking about decentralized teams. So 2 ways. I like to do them both until the team gets in a habit of checking the dashboard with an XM Cloud and creating those governance and processes.
We're not on cloud yet. We're back in the Stone Ages. But
so if you have XP2, it'll tell you the active test.
Okay.
Yeah, so you will have an active test not only on the page, but you can view the experience optimization report, and that'll give you a breakdown of that as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I don't think so. Tiffany, it was really very good session. I have worked with XM Cloud, but I think this particular A/B testing was released a little late last year, so didn't get much chance to experiment on that. But it is really very helpful as Sitecore XM Cloud is adding more and more features. So it is excellent. It is becoming an excellent product, a perfect replacement for, not yet, but it will be a perfect replacement for XP in future once we have all the composable DXP stack integrated, at least some part. But really good to know about A/B testing, how it works. Thank you so much. Any last questions, anyone?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.